Welcome to the Prison Professors Program. My name is Michael Santos, and one of the things that I really get enthusiastic about doing is sharing stories about other people who once served time in prison and then came back to society and worked hard to build their career and build their life. And today we get to interview a fella who spent multiple decades in prison, but he really used his time inside in a way to prepare for success. His name is KC. He is an author. You can see him on the other side of my screen right there. KC, why don't you tell us about the three books that you have there in your video window?
The three books I wrote, the first one I wrote was Behind the Convict's Eyes. I wrote that mainly with Thomas Bernard, and then from there, while I was in prison, then from there I came up with another book, which was the point where they sent us down to a private prison system while I was incarcerated, and throughout that process, I wrote Prison Inc. And Tom, at that time, he believed that the written word from prisoners should be published. So he helped me out a lot with that. Then as I moved on with my education and I moved on to get my doctorate degree, I wrote a dissertation on time and not so much the abstract time, but the reality of how we experience it day to day. And that's where the Cage of Days came in with my co-author, Mike. And that we went through on that one probably a 10-year process, and I wanted it out sooner. However, the time frame he was using, he had to teach and stuff like that, so it took longer. He actually went overseas on a sabbatical to write on it, just so he could just focus on that. And he's a real detailed research type of guy. So eventually, it all came together. And I mean, I knew him inside prison. And when I was paroled, I still kept up with him. And actually, we met on Skype the first time. And then earlier this year, I actually was lucky. I got down to his class where he wanted me to talk. And I mean, that was the first time I met him physically. And, I was amazed how long it took, but yet I was amazed how welcoming he was too. He was just like, "Come on, teach the class," So that was a nice thing. I felt very welcome there.
Let's take it a little slower. I'm so glad that you gave us that broad overview. But I think since most of the people who are watching the Prison Professors program are inside of jails and prisons across America, it would be very helpful, I think, if you just gave them your background of what brought you into prison, how much time you served. We'll get into your mindset of what your mindset was from at the start of your prison sentence, and if it changed over time. So give us the quick background of what brought you into the criminal justice system, and tell us a little bit about the journey.
I had basically a fight with an individual. And at the end of it, it led to me taking his life. And from there,
What year was that? What year was that, Casey?
Oh, probably 1980.
And how old were you at that time?
I was basically 20 years old.
So you were 20 years old, you got into a fight and somebody died, and you went into the criminal justice system then. Where did you start? What level of prison did you start? And what was your mindset when you got there?
Well, the level I started was with my sentence structure. There was immediately you're going to the maximum. At that time, they sent me to a prison. They kept me at the receiving center for a couple of years, then they sent me out at that time they called it Gladiator School, and I thought, well, that sounds like a nice place to go. I guess when you first initially walk into prison, your mindset is entering the buildings and stuff. It's like it's overwhelming in a sense, and I'm assuming you probably went through the same process, is because you start asking yourself, what am I doing in this place? And it's people say, if you say to somebody, man, it was scary, they look at you like, oh, you're scary. Well, no, that's not true. It's just like your whole world's now flipped, and you hear all these stories, while you're waiting in county jail, how bad this is and how bad that is, and you just hear this constant uh, talk about those places are violent, and then you get there, so you have that concept kind of put in your brain from everybody else. But as you go through the process and live there, when I was in gladiator school, I spent probably 10 years there, and you started to learn the system. You started
Were you serving a life sentence, KC?
Yeah, they gave me life with parole at 11/3 was the earliest, and then about 31 years later, they released me.
So during the first 10 years, when you had life without parole, what was your mindset? What were you trying to do during that first decade of imprisonment?
Uh,
Was it just survival, or did you work towards achieving something?
well, I think probably half the sentence was for surviving. Uh, uh,
Does
but
that mean for the first 15 years of your prison sentence, you were just kind of adjusting to the prison and not thinking about getting out? Is that what I understood you to say?
well, no, I think you have to realize when you get transferred to different prisons, stuff like that, and you hear uh, the rumors and stuff like that about this prisoner you're going to, that prisoner you're going to, bad place, and it's a new environment, so you never know what you're going to encounter, you know, uh, and you have no choice but do it. Over my I guess career in prison, I think I went to 12, 15 prisons. Uh,
But
when I got
if you could, like you're speaking right now to a lot of people who are in jail or prison,
okay,
and they're wondering about getting out. And my message to them is always they should start sowing seeds really early and start preparing for when they get out.
yeah,
My question
yeah.
for you is, did you have that mindset of start preparing to get out at the very start of your sentence, or did that mindset shift much later in your sentence?
Uh, I didn't have that at first,
That's
you know.
important to say, right? That's one of the things I kind of want to focus on, because there's a lot of people that don't have that mindset at first. Instead, they're going into that same mindset of adjusting, letting the outside world kind of control their adjustment patterns, because people tell them how to behave or what's good or what's
Right,
bad. And they're
right,
not thinking about, well, how am I going to come out like KC and have multiple books that I authored sitting beside me? And I always encourage them, hey, learn from a story. If I was listening to you and I was still serving a 45-year sentence, I would have
right,
been saying, look at that guy successful right now. He's got 3 books behind him. When I get out, that's what I want to do, and I want to get started on that right away.
right.
At what stage in your journey did you make a shift and say, I've got to start focusing on developing my education or my skill set?
I think the starting point. I would say the starting point is when they sent me to gladiator school. Uh, I avoided trouble. Going to segregation is no fun. Uh, and I would say I was there. Maybe that put me about 5 years into prison, something like that. Maybe 4 years.
And what
I
did you
had,
do that was different? Did you start going to school at that point, or participating in vocational programs, or tell us what you started to do to make the change?
that's at that point, because that was, now I don't think those classes are even up in the prison anymore. I do not know, but they actually had school that allowed you to get a degree from accredited university. And what I wanted to do was some different things. And they give you the batteries to test, and they say, "Well, you graduated high school. Okay, that's good. That one's done." And I don't remember what time it happened, but somewhere in that time frame, they had a counselor there, and she told me, she said, you do have the ability. We have a college program that'll give you an associate's degree, and that's where it started, basically right there at that point. At that point, uh, they offered it, and I was hesitant at first. But then I thought, you know what? Hey, like she told me, hey, you don't make it, you don't make it. You tried. And she handled it so well. I just like, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. You know, and actually, when I got involved in the beginning, I was just interested in it. It was like, wow, here's my chance, so to speak. So I went through the first 2 years, and I think she allowed me to stay in it like one more year or something like that, because I got a whole bunch of other credits too, where different courses I could take, and then the time came. They said, okay, we got to get you out of here. So from that point, I really started missing it. So
Does that mean that you got your associate's degree and a little more, then they transferred you to another prison and there was
no,
no school available there?
I was still in the same prison. And
When you
what
said you started to miss it, what does that mean?
when I was in my cell, doing what they did is, once I graduated, they said, hey, guess what? Become a tutor for other people. So I said, yeah, okay, that's a good gig.
But did that end your ability to work toward more advanced degrees?
No, actually, it helped out because it kept me in the education area.
Got it.
And then I found a program from another accredited university, and they offered a Bachelor of Science degree. And I thought, wow, boy, and at this time, this is before Bill Clinton stopped the Pell Grants. I thought, I had a way to get some money. I worked for the money in prison is what I did. I'll explain that to you in a minute. But what I did then was I enrolled into this program. And I thought it'd be kind of like the liberal arts college that I went to, but it was not. And it was all through correspondence, basically. And sometimes I had to go to the counselor's office and make a phone call and stuff like that. And once I got into that, she was really supportive. The teacher that I helped tutor in his class, Ken, I won't say his last name, he was like amazed when he found that out. He didn't even know I was doing it, but then he found it out. And he was like more than supportive. A lot of times if he didn't have a class going on, he'd let me down to study, stuff like that. And we used to talk about some of this stuff. And that's what I liked about him. He was very well read. So I gained that degree, and actually,
How far into your sentence were you when you got your bachelor's degree?
it probably took me 5 years to get it. So let's say, now we're into about 1990, kind of that level.
So you'd been in prison for about 10 years, and a university awarded your bachelor's degree. And while you were in school, did that influence your behavior in prison, like lessen your exposure to disciplinary infractions, or what influence did school have on your adjustment in prison?
I never really had many disciplinary infractions, but what it did do is, because now let's talk about how I paid for it. They also had, at that time, they called it a hobby shop. And, you can make belts and you could paint. And I sold buku paintings to guards of wildlife. I made belts for other prisoners, officers, stuff like that. And I saved that money. Plus, and I made more money doing that than I actually made being a tutor for them, for a week or whatever, and I put that money into it. And I probably could have got down a little bit sooner, but I only had so much money. So, I worked my butt off to make that stuff and hobby and sell these pictures and paintings. And then I put money in this education. So my mindset at that time was, hey, all that noise out there in the background of what's happening inside the prison, that's just a soap opera. I don't need that. I'm doing something. And
so being in school kind of gave more meaning to your life. And so that you weren't just a guy serving a life sentence, you were a guy working toward contributing to society and really being a part of society. And that helped your self-esteem and self-confidence.
Yeah. And the beautiful part to me was, it wasn't the degree I probably would have chose, but now I'm out. I'm glad that degree was in business administration. And what I did basically at the same time while I was doing that, because I found it very fascinating, I took some paralegal courses. And what it was is I was kind of like engulfing myself in another world in a sense, where you could kind of leave the prison behind, even if it was for an hour or two, just reading, and trying to develop my writing habits, stuff like that. It was a challenge, and I started seeing other people too, doing stuff like I knew a gentleman. His first name was Alfredo. He was from Mexico. He could not speak any English whatsoever when he got locked up, and he was telling me his story a little bit. But yet, I remember one day I was in the line, we were talking, and I kind of like went like that, kind of smiled, and then his reaction was, wait, am I saying the words wrong? And the amazing thing was, I said, no, I'm not smiling because of that or kind of chuckling about that. You speak better English than I do. You got a lot bigger words. I said, it's amazing to me how you have done this, and people like that, staying away from the soap opera and all the trouble in the mix, people like that, you kind of hang out with because they support your values. And he would ask me a lot of questions of what I'm going through and stuff like that when it came to the education. And that's very important. And then your friends, once you get above, here's the next thing. Once you get above, this all affects you too, by the way. Once you get above that racial game in prison, because that is just like society today. It's a tough game to play. But once you step above that, then you realize, there are a lot of individuals that you're surrounding yourself by, or you can surround yourself by. And there were a lot of individuals that I surrounded myself by that I didn't care what they looked like. If they were doing good and staying out of trouble, I'd hang out with them,
And that really helps to dispel this myth that says,
yes.
if you're white, you can only talk to white guys. That was not my experience of going through prison in 26 years. I sat with whoever I wanted to sit with and walked any yard that I wanted to sit with, but it was always with a focus because I made it very clear I'm about preparing for success after release. And it sounds like you had that same experience. So I think it's important for people to hear that because there's so much of this noise, as you call it, this bad messaging that says you can't interact with different racial groups and the gangs are going to get you or whatever. But the reality is if you're focused on success, you find a pathway to make it through. And it's just so helpful for people to listen to a guy who was once serving a life sentence for murder. It really had a different experience. He focused on education and he got through there with very, very little in the way of disciplinary problems. And that's really awesome that you shared that story.
Yes. I've even had college students like saying, wait a minute, you're telling me all about this racial level in prison, but yet as I hate to use the word terms white, black, Latino, because that's
just people. We're just people.
People, yeah. Exactly. And he's like, well, how can you tell us all this and then all these people who are black or Latino? You see where I'm going? And I started developing the same habit you did, and believe me, and some of the white people I knew, they thought I was anywhere from being a nut to crazy. How it didn't really bother me that much. I just looked at them as people. I stayed away from the ones that caused trouble, but I didn't care about all that. And that was a mindset that I went to, and that's one reason when I started doing my my master's and my PhD in psychology, you start realizing like, hey, this game is a game here, just like it is. It's a tool, and you realize, like simply like you said, they're people.
You said that you got a master's and your PhD. What universities awarded your master's and your PhD?
I gotta think. I had to do correspondence now because I wasn't out of prison. Newport University.
Oh, I know them, out of California. That's where you got your master's, and your PhD. Did you get it from Newport as well?
No. To be honest with you, I just could not afford the prices.
Right.
And I wish I would have stayed there at least. I really do wish I would have.
They had that installment program where you could pay monthly. I remember looking at them. I wanted to go to law school there.
Right, but the thing that I was so scared about was having this big bill, and you got to remember now you're in prison, and the only way you could do like I was doing correspondence was you have to show us that you can pay for the bill. And they wouldn't, if you couldn't pay for each course as you went through it, you had no opportunity there. You could not credit. Like, I see what you're saying, but you just couldn't do that. That was unallowed.
So Casey, you turned your attention to publishing. At what stage in your journey did you start working towards becoming a published author? How many years were you in, more or less?
Let me just you're asking me questions that they're good questions. Don't get me wrong. I'm just peeking it up real quick because I want to see the date of the copyright. That's all I'm looking for. Yeah, where is it? Yeah. Okay, this book here was 2004 when that was published.
So you'd been in prison then. You said you went into 1980. So in 2004, that's 24 years into the journey. What kind of feeling of fulfillment or sense of accomplishment did you feel? And you said, wow, I have a published book. Describe that.
I guess because you're like, I don't know how to say it, but it really didn't hit me like I mean, don't get me wrong. I thought I was very glad when I finished the book. I accomplished something. That was great. But I did not realize who Thomas Bernard was.
Who is Thomas Damaris? Who's Thomas?
Thomas Bernard was a leading criminologist out of Penn State University.
Okay.
And what happened there was
Did Thomas have a role in helping publish your book?
Yes. He helped me with both books.
Okay.
He really did. And,
so you found a mentor inside,
and
that mentor kind of steered you toward striking an agreement with a publishing house and getting that book into distribution. Is that right?
Yeah. And then I learned a lot of things from him about how the processing works with the publisher.
Is he still working at Penn State University?
No, actually, that was one of the sad parts of being in the cage. Is I was probably 2 years before I got released, something like that. He was letting me call him at his home, and I was the only guy he let call at his home. I found that out from my co-author Mike. But he told me one day, he said, "Hey, this will be our last call." And you got like you got like 10 minutes. And he developed brain cancer. And it's like 10 minutes. What do you say in 10 minutes?
Wow. I had a similar experience where one of my mentors, and I wrote about it in Earning Freedom, Dr. Bruce McPherson was a mentor of mine and used to visit me in prison and really assisted me in my education. And he passed away when I was about 10 years from getting out. But I'm sure that he's looking down at you and he's very proud of what you've accomplished. I think what would be really awesome, Casey, is to tell our audience, how did you get out of prison? Was it just the parole board that let you out?
Yeah, parole board. I said, just so we're clear, they gave me life with parole. And going in the 80s and coming out, in 2010 or whatever it was, or something like that, 12, I probably went through the same thing you did, mass incarceration. And when I first entered the gate, they said, you'll be out probably maximum 14 years. If you don't cause no trouble, you'll be out in 12. All right? Mass incarceration is. So you guess what happened? Well, 31 years later, okay, I guess it's time to get rid of you. We're tired of you, so to speak.
It's very difficult, but a lot of the work that you did it have a role in influencing the parole board eventually when you were able to show them I earned an undergrad, a master's, a PhD, and authored multiple books? How did the parole board respond to that?
They didn't really know so much about the material I was writing because that was a no-no too in prison. at first it was okay, but then they changed the rule on that. Uh, but the books, so that didn't have an influence on them. The education, it really didn't have an influence on them either. I can only speak for myself firsthand. I would always go in there, and they would always give me that, man, a lot of accomplishments. You've done some stuff here. You're really smart. And then you get to that point where they say, but. So, everything they told you before that is like, yeah, okay, now tell me the truth. You ain't going nowhere. And that's one hard thing about a sentence too, is when they choose for you to go and they keep encouraging you and say, come back next year and keep doing what you're doing. But yet you go back year after. You got to remember now, I seen them the first time in 11 years, and here you are going back year. You start losing a little hope here, even though they tell you, man, you're the next prisoner. You're so close to sliced bread, the invention of sliced bread. You could be a good role model when you get out there. Yeah, right. Okay, now, but
how old were you when you got out?
50. So I'm 60 now. So yeah, about 10 years ago, 50.
So you were 50. I was 49 when I got out. And you went in when you were 20. So you served 31. How many years did you serve in prison?
30. It was either 30 or 31.
And how was your adjustment coming out? Tell us about what it was like to come back to society after 30 years in prison, and what type of income opportunities opened for you or didn't open for you.
Well, coming out, once again, now they don't have these programs anymore. But when you got down to minimum security, if you played the game for about 6 months or a year in the camp, and they seen you weren't no threat and you weren't going to run off, you got to go out actually in the community and work.
So wait a minute. Help me get this clarity as well, because this goes to state prisons and federal prisons. You're convicted of murder. You're serving a life sentence. And the institution where you were confined, or the system where you were confined, they allowed you to go to a minimum security camp without boundaries and have community involvement?
Yes.
How many years did you have to serve in higher security prisons before you could get to minimum security?
Well, I served basically 10 years in max, or close to that. I would say I probably served maybe somewhere around the last 5 years, basically a minimum.
So that's really powerful, because I'm sure that, I know that when I went to prison, they told me I would serve my entire 45-year sentence in high security penitentiaries, but I also went to a minimum security camp. And you had that same experience.
It sounds very similar, because, they, I guess you don't grasp on it. You've been in the cage so long, and all of a sudden the cage now they send you. You don't grasp on. There's no stone wall. There's no two fences with barbed wire. It's actually a rite of passage, because when you get there, you're like, wow.
Yeah, it feels like you're free, even just being in a minimum security camp. Other people who start in a camp, they don't really have that same perspective. No. They don't realize how fortunate they are to start in an environment like that rather than a higher security prison. Casey,
that was one policy they changed when I first got locked up. It didn't matter. It did not matter what you did. You ended up in maximum, even if you had, say, a 2-year sentence, because I think that was what brought you to prison, 2 years or over. You went up there even for 6 months, because that was their policy. And then they'd work you down the system. So you go up, say, 6 months and wait to get down the system to get to minimum security. And later on, they changed that. They felt that was a bad thought, because if your crime was low security and we send you to maximum, you're going to become a better criminal. You're better off to go to minimum. I think that was some of their philosophy behind it.
There's a lot of philosophy behind it, and that's what you and I try to work to improve. But Casey, tell the audience somewhat about your return to society and what experience you had in trying to earn a living and get stable after multiple decades in prison.
Well, that's kind of an interesting point. I'll keep this short on that one. I actually had a friend who was locked up And people are going to go like, what? You actually did that? I sent him a check for about $5,000 to buy me a car. And when I tell it to people, they're just like, and he didn't steal the money from you? But after I met him for years and years, I knew the guy just wouldn't do it. And he helped other prisoners out, not quite as helpful as he did with me. I got in the car. I was in one state, and now I tell you I'm down here in Chicagoland, and that's where I drove to that day. And I'll tell you that whole moment of driving, because I was allowed to earn my license in prison to drive, but that whole moment of driving into Chicagoland and the traffic and just the thought of being out, I mean, I'm this guy going down the freeway about 50 miles an hour in the right lane because I got all these vehicles around me, and it's just like it's a mind opener or a wide opener. I'll tell you that.
Let me ask you some specific questions. When you got out of prison, after 30 years in prison, did you have financial resources in the bank?
I think I came out with a check for about $5,000.
$5,000. And in your first year of liberty, do you have an idea of how much you earned during your first year of liberty after 30 years in prison?
Boy, that's a good question.
just an idea.
Maybe.
Did you earn $1,000 a month, $5,000 a month?
Maybe $1,000 a month, something like that. Because I was driving cab.
So you came out of prison after 30 years, and you had academic credentials of, I know, an undergraduate and a master's degree. Did you also have your PhD when you got out of prison?
Yes.
So you had a PhD, 30 years of experience. You were a published author, and your first year you had to drive a cab and earn about $1,000 a month, which is $12,000 a year. Not a livable wage out here. Is that right?
No, totally agree. Even right now, I'm like, this is, it's like you look at the bills, then you look at the money, and you're like, keep working on this. And when you drive a taxi or a cab, however you want to call it, they pay you a lot of cash.
Hold on a second. I just wanted to record that really brief clip on this other device that I have here. I'll show you on the screen because I will use this to record something short that I want to send to society as well. I want people to see that when an individual comes out of prison, that individual faces an entirely new prison system, and that's the prison system of poverty and the challenge of living in poverty without getting out, without credit, without a work history, without an income stream, and frequently that leads many people into making decisions that send them back to prison. Now, fortunately, you had a stronger mindset to stay out, but you've been out for 9 years. You're a published author. You have a doctorate degree. Before you got out, did you have any idea of how much it would cost to live in society, or did you not have an idea?
You have a vague idea watching the news on TV. However, once again, it's not in your brain mentally. No, I had no clue.
And so you've been out now for 9 years. Have you ever felt, after 9 years of liberty or 10 years of liberty now, have you ever felt that you're back and you're earning what you should be earning, or is it still you're facing a financial hardship?
Okay, that's an excellent question too. And you said here you got all these degrees, and you're driving cab. Okay, so while I was doing that, I was writing schools and stuff like that, saying, hey, maybe I could be a lecturer, stuff like that. I went through that process too. And I never got anywhere. Recently, I asked the college that teaches in Statesville Prison in Illinois, I asked them, would you be willing to hire a lecturer? Here's my credentials.
Wait a second. I want to ask you that again because I want to capture that on a short video that I could also share with people so that people can understand that experience. So we're speaking with KC, who served 30 years in prison. While he was in prison, he earned a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a doctorate degree, and he's telling us about coming back to society and trying to use the skills that he developed in prison to build his life outside. Could you repeat what you just said about the efforts that you were making to reach into universities and connect?
Yeah, yeah. As I said, I was, doing the cab thing, and then what I was doing is I was like sending letters out, stuff like that. Trying to make some phone calls. My skills on the computer were pretty poor, but I learned that how to work that slowly. And what I would do is look for places that were like close by to me, and send information out, seeing if I could possibly at least get something where they said, yeah, we would hire you as a lecturer. We're fine with that. Uh, then the other hang up is I'm still on parole. So then you gotta go through that phase of going from one state to the next state, and that's a process too. It doesn't just like you just can't get in the car and just go. But I didn't get anywhere. It just seemed like I wasn't getting anywhere, and just previously, that was probably less than a month or two ago, I contacted Northwestern University, who teaches at state-built prison, and I thought, let me ask them if they need a lecturer. What a better lecturer could you have as a prisoner who's out here kind of getting successful, and maybe he can, teach them some of the knowledge he knows. And I truly felt like I was just rebuffed. They said, no, our staff handles that. We don't hire lecturers, and then I asked them. I never got an answer back. But I said, well, what kind of staff are you hiring?
Well, let's I'm going to continue that on the longer interview. I just wanted our viewers to have that short clip that talks about some of the collateral consequences that people go through when they come out of prison. I'm going to stop the short video now.
Thank you.
And I'll be blipping that to you in a while. But that is just such important stories for us to share with people, to help people understand, both in prison, hey, if I were listening to this, if I were in prison serving a long sentence and I heard what you just said, that would have just inspired my adjustment somewhat of realizing I've got to figure out a way how to come back stronger with with more financial resources and more income streams. Because if you can figure that out, things become a lot more opportunities open. How did you connect with me, Casey? How did you know who I am?
You were actually, you're in my first book as a site or something like that. That's how I found out about you. I wrote an article with a professor over in Indiana, and she one day sent me like 13, 14 books, all written by prisoners. And, she had, you couldn't just send, actually, I think it ended up, after a while, it was more like 20, 25 books. But you can't just send a box of books in and say, here, you know how it goes. You can only get so many books in at a time. And she just started sending them, and I was, at that time, I think I was working on my doctorate, but I seen your book before, and she sent it to me when I was working on the first book, I believe, and I read it. That's the one I said, yeah, you wrote that one book about being in prison in California. I forgot the name of it. I'm sorry.
I wrote a lot of books, so I don't know which one it was, but that, so you heard about me while you were still in prison.
Yeah. Because like I was studying under prison officers.
Right.
And as I went through it, when I got out, man, I don't even remember when I contacted you when I got out.
I just heard from you the first time last week. And
we actually talked once before. But I mean, that was like 9 years ago or something.
I was probably just getting out of prison myself. I don't remember that. But my whole career has been about working to bring more awareness to the criminal justice system and what we can do to improve outcomes and what people can do to improve outcomes for themselves. And that's how I've earned a living since I've gotten out of prison. But my experience, there's been other business opportunities that I've seized all around the lessons that I learned while I was in prison. But I've earned a living. Have you been able to earn a living based on, and I'll put this on the short video as well. Have you, let me just hit record. Casey, have you been able to earn what you would call a livable wage or a good living since you've been out of prison, or have you faced financial challenges?
I, 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 I face financial challenges. I'm facing one right now. It's not like I'm broke, but it's like, with inflation and all that, you don't buy meat no more. I'll tell you that. Ramen soup, noodles are pretty good. What I was trying to shoot for was these books in my education. And the classes I've talked at, all the professors, I have never had anybody say he ain't coming back. Like my co-author in Florida, he wants me back this year. But I'm like, Mike, if I got to pay for a trip myself, I'm sorry, but that might be, $2,000 to go down and come back. And he's like, well, let's do it over Zoom. Okay, we can do that. But Zoom is not the same as when you're physically in the class in front of students. However, we're contemplating that. Jeff Ross, he's on the back of some of my books too. He said, you could come up here to his classes and talk about it.
But you know something, to go and talk about it is great. To do something is great, but you've got to really get strong financially first. And I hope that I'm going to give you some ideas as we continue with this interview that will help you turn your experience and wisdom into something that can help you earn a livable wage.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Actually, I didn't expect. I'll be honest with you. Now, the first time we talked, this I do remember. You said, "Hey, well, if you ever want to get together and talk sometime, let me know." And basically, I'm just summing it up real quick. And we did speak multiple phone numbers ago, for me, anyways. But when I reached out this time, excuse me, it amazed me. Excuse me. It amazed me. This is what amazed me. I thought, this guy, even right now, I'm hearing you and I've seen some of your stuff. I said, he hasn't changed. It was like, you must have contacted me back like in, 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes?
I don't know. I have a system where there's thousands of people reaching me. I can't even look at them all. But my wife passed it along and said, oh, this guy was in prison a long time. My wife works with me full time. And that's why right away I reached back out to you.
Right. And then somehow, I don't know, I guess you sent me a text or something like that. You must have seen my email with a number on it or something. I'm guessing. I don't even know. I'm guessing. And then to actually move this quickly, trust me, I'm enjoying our conversation greatly because I see a role model right there on the computer screen. Computer screen's here, you're up there. But it's like, you're saying, hey, this guy's got some things I could learn about, even at 60 years old. Maybe there's something to what he's got going on here, I just thought I'd reach out. What the heck?
Well, I'm glad that you did reach out, and I'm glad because I want to share this message with really, that's really what I want to have an impact on the lives of people in prison to help them see it's not easy. It's not easy to come out of prison. Too many people that are going into the system, they're focused only on the sentence, but what they really have to think about is that sentence is going to end. What's the next phase of the life? If you don't prepare yourself well, it is a lifetime of struggle and difficulty. Now, one of the differences between you and me is that I'm very public, right? My name is Michael Santos. You see it all over. If you Google my name, I'm everywhere. I'm only calling you KC out of respect for you because you don't want to have your name out there. My face is everywhere. You want me to blur your face on these videos, which I'm willing to do so that people won't see you. But there's a cost that comes with that. If you pursue that path of being halfway, I want to tell my story, but halfway, I don't want people to see me. Well, it's difficult for you to go and start launching a career, getting on the news, for example, or getting in the newspaper or bringing media attention to you because it's like you're saying, I want to go be a professional basketball player, but I'm only going to play barefoot. I'm not going to put shoes on, right? Or I'm going to be a boxer, but I'm going to keep my hands tied behind my back. It's a little difficult to succeed that way. So sometimes it becomes, important to say, what can I do? In what way can I bring value to society? And the sooner you can answer that question, that should help you make a decision on what's the cost benefit analysis of me being hidden versus me being public. And I think that these are questions, Casey, that only you can answer. I can't answer those questions for you, but I can tell you, if you have questions for me, how I did it, I'll be, one thing I promise you is I'll be honest and open and tell you exactly what I do, how I do it, why I do it, and what I earned from it. Because I want people to see success doesn't come by accident. You've got to make a conscious choice. So do you have questions on how I did it or what's different between you and me? Because I'm going to answer your questions now.
Okay. So as we were talking before, I mentioned I was driving a truck, and the guy that was like the assistant to the boss. Now I'm in the job for about 6 months to a year, something like that, somewhere in there. He calls me up out of the blue one day, and he tells me, "Hey, how you doing? Something came up." You see what I'm saying? And at first I like thinking, "You're not gonna fire me, are you?" or I didn't turn a trailer and it was dented. And he was like, "No, something came up about your past." Long story short, he found out about my sentence. And now I'm thinking, "Oh, I'm dead in the water here." And he said he talked to the boss and everything else. And he said, "Man, he seems like a good guy. I mean, he's driving truck. He's doing his job. I mean, he hasn't done anything crazy, and he told me, eventually he led to him saying, "You have a friend over here, just so you know, if you need work, you have a friend over here." Well, that scared me even more. I'm going to tell you why. Because now if you change, this is truck driving now. Now if you go to a different carrier and they pass that message along, you see where I'm going with that?
No, I don't. I don't see where you're going with that. Where are you going?
Okay. He knows I've been to prison. He knows I took a human life. If I go to a different carrier or a different company and they pass that along, because they want your record of everywhere you work for 10 years, or 7 years or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. So if they pass that message on, well, we found this thing out about him, quote unquote, he took a life, then do you think they're going to hire you? No. Okay, now let's fast forward this. I have a day job where I put food on the table. And like you're saying, you have to make this call. And this is what I think about. It's a very scary moment because let's say I go public, like turn the switch on tomorrow. And then my day job might come back and say, hey, we recognize you. Hasta la vista, get another job.
Did you lose that job when the first person recognized you, or did you hold on to that job?
He kept me on. But my biggest fear was when he found out about it, like, are they kind of your biggest fear is, well, I appreciate that, yes. But then in the back of your mind, you got that fear.
So you're vulnerable. So you felt vulnerable. I can understand that. That's one of the reasons that I made different decisions, is I didn't ever want to be in that position of somebody having to hire me or having to go out and get a job. I felt it was much more important for me to create my own jobs and create my own opportunities. And that's, for me to do that, I cannot hide from who I am. And I found that people are receptive. If you've faced a challenge in your life and you've overcome that challenge and you could articulate how you overcame that challenge, there are people that will say there's value in listening to that person, and they will pay for that. And that's what my whole career has been about. It's what I continue doing, and that's what I would recommend you at least consider as you go forward. And it doesn't have to be about hiding it. It has to be about saying, maybe I can build a career talking about it. But you're going after a market without any money. That's one challenge. You're going after trying to go into academia and get college professors to pay you a fee, and they don't have a budget. So if they don't have a budget, they can't pay you. But you could be doing something else. There are other ways for you to, there's a lot of ways, as they say, to skin a cat. And, I would make an argument that says, if you've overcome what you've overcome, life sentence, 30 plus years in prison while getting a PhD, you could go into many businesses and say, let me come here and coach your people, your team, how to become more productive or more efficient. If I had to learn inside of a prison, imagine what I could teach your team who's out here with all the resources they have. That is fundamentally different, because if you go into a business that has let's say I'm a business owner and I've got 50 employees and I'm paying those employees $20 an hour. Well, just the simple math right there is telling me $20 an hour times 50, I'm paying $1,000 an hour to keep those people working. That means every day I'm paying $8,000 in wages. Right. If I could increase their productivity by 25%, I've done well for my company. So 25%, $8,000 a day, that would be, just do some simple math, that's about $2,000 extra a day. So in 5 days, he's going to make $10,000 more by increasing productivity. And you could go and sell that business owner. Say, I want to come and make a presentation to your office, and my fee is $500, or my fee is $1,000, or my fee is $2,000, or whatever it is. You are now marketing yourself as an expert. Instead of coming from a position of weakness, you're coming from a position of strength. That takes time. That takes using all of your critical thinking skills to figure out, how am I going to get leads for this market? How am I going to close sales? How many do I have to do? How many sales do I have to make in order for me to earn enough living that now, wow, my history works in my favor rather than against me? You know,
I'm sorry, I was trying to interrupt you, but I'm like, there you go, Mike. Now you know I reached out to you. I thought, you're never too old to learn. I thought, this guy's been pretty successful. And I wasn't sure how many years you were out. I knew you were out for a while.
It's been 9 years as of now. Right. I was 9 years. Yeah.
We've been out the same time. We've been out basically the same time. And I thought to myself, he knows something I don't know. So let me reach out and ask him, help me a little bit, show me what you do know to help me out to see which way I should go on this.
Well, let's do this, because this interview now, we've already gone for 54 minutes, and the videos that I bring into prisons can only go about an hour. So I'm going to close this video right here for prison professors. And I'm going to thank you, Casey, for being on this program, sharing your books, and telling us your story of how you earned an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, and a PhD while serving a life sentence, became a published author, but also the sad challenges that you've faced in being able to earn a living since you've come home. And we'll do a shorter video right now after this that I will answer those questions of things that I think you can do. But I think I got to break that into a second video, because this one's getting beyond the limit. So do you have any final words for the people that are watching this one, Casey?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. I've really enjoyed this, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
We're going to do it again right now, but I'm going to close this video out, so stop.